we've got Sandy Gildea from Sparta, and because two Kellys are always better than one, we've got Kelly Lucas from the Screen Guild and ScreenSafe, who are going to take you through this brilliant presentation. But that's not all. We've also got Thomas Capel, an independent producer, who is going to give you some information from some of their experiences. So perhaps you can learn from the mistakes that they've made. And we're ably supported by Nina L'Esperance, who is in our comms team here at New Zealand On Air. And I'm Kelly Davis, and I'm an associate head of funding at New Zealand On Air as well. And I'm not going to actually say too much. I'm just going to introduce everybody and get us underway. Because we're a small group, it'll be really brilliant if you've got questions for you to air those, because other people may have them as well. And this type of subject matter where we get into things like legal entities and taxation, you may have some really specific questions. So if you do, pop them in the chat. Nina is going to capture them, and we may answer them as we move through rather than hold them to the end, just because that might be a bit more fun. But there will also be time for questions at the end as well. But do feel free to ask them, because there's a really good chance that somebody else is wondering the same things that you are. So I think that's everything that we need to say before we get underway. So I'll hand over to Sandy from Sparta, who's going to get us started with some of the basics that you need to know.
Good, thanks, Kelly. Hi, everyone. Lovely to see either your names or your lovely faces today. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you for asking me to be part of this discussion, to New Zealand On Air, Thomas, Nina, and Kelly. I think the key thing to remember is that I think we all come to this as beginners, or at least with a beginner's mind. It's quite nice as just sort of settling back into where we're at the moment and taking a deep breath. And I'm saying this mainly for my own purposes, just kind of reset my head to, I suppose, create a bit of space between where we might be, either with a project right now or what we've been doing this morning, and to kind of ask ourselves some of the bigger questions that might be useful for you to think about as you are embarking on your career, if you are a few years into your career, if you've already set up your own business, or if you are thinking about setting up your own business. I think to have some goals and an approach, or the word strategy to use, can be a useful guide for everybody. On the slide that we've got up on the screen now, we've called it sort of key things to think about when considering a screen career. So look, some of the things that we're sharing today, and just an invitation for you to think about, maybe when you're at home, when you've got a bit of spare time, is to ponder some of these core values that you have as a person and how you integrate those into your professional business life. When you're thinking about entering the screen industry, what are some of the key goals that you want to achieve? Is it that you want to start small and expand to become either, if you're thinking about the producing route, an individual producer, but then setting up a bigger production company, which then hires other producers, which then you can develop a bigger slate so that you can then have an assistant so that you hire other people? Or do you want to set up on the screen workers side with crew? If you're wanting to set up your own business, say if you're gaffer, electrician, your own company, these are some of the sorts of things. Do you want to grow? Do you want to keep it small? What does a successful business look like to you? Or to not even use the word business, what does success look like to you as an individual, as a person? These are really important things to think about. You've probably all made something, I'm assuming, but share with us if you haven't, something so far in your screen career. So you'll know that it takes a lot of time and energy, and time, your time and other people's time is super, super valuable. It's super important how we spend that time, where we put our energy. You could be looking at developing a project for 3 to 5 years. So you've got to be very clear, I think, so that you continue to always grow and move in the direction that you want to move in, to be quite intentional at the beginning. Because if you have some of those guiders, those markers, those signposts, whatever you want to call them, they will help as a rudder to steer your decision making along the path, because there will be lots of opportunities. Some may look really good, but maybe they will move you away from where you really wanted to be. But, you know, it's sometimes hard to say no to something, but it's a very careful thing to think about, because sometimes a no could be the right decision for you. So I think at all stages, draw on the knowledge and the expertise from either your friends, even your family, from other colleagues in the industry, from funders, from distributors, from broadcasters, from other people who've worked on set, anybody. I think everyone can be a teacher. And so don't be afraid to ask. You know, when you're moving then into more complex structural things, such as what we'll be talking about with our tax, etc., they will become some of the detail that you need to think about. But as the overarching umbrella of where you sit and where you want to sit in the industry, I think really giving yourself the time, whether it's a whole day, a weekend, to really think about some of those core questions and values will hopefully be very, very valuable to you as you move forward. So I think that would just be what I'd like to open with, and I'm sure Kelly has got some other gems to add to that.
Thanks, Sandy. Thank you, everybody, for having me today. It's an absolute honour to be here and talk to this wonderful group. And thank you, Kelly and Thomas and Nina and New Zealand On Air for having us along. Those core values, absolutely. I mean, putting my ScreenSafe hat on as well. Our tagline, there's no hierarchy to respect. And, you know, it really comes in around what kind of core values you want to bring to the industry as a whole as well. This is an industry that will, you know, you do become a family. Some of us have been around for a really long time, like Sandy and I have known each other for nearly 20 years, I think. And, you know, I think it's going to be so much a part of who you are, it becomes a part of this industry as well, and where you want to sit. I think Sandy's definitely hit a really great amount of points that to really be thinking about. And as we go through these slides, I'll sort of be adding in from a below the line. Obviously, I run the Screen Industry Guild, so that is all below the line crew. And I've seen people come in at the crew level and work their way through. And a lot of our crew also are producers. So we'll touch more on that as we go through. But it's really sort of seeing where you want to sit, where you want to be, where you part, and start thinking really about your pathway and where you want to hit those really key points and what line you want to come through as you build your career. So I think that's, I think Sandy's hit a lot of those points, but we will go into those a little bit more where we get to the next 3 to 5 years. Thanks, Sandy.
Thanks, Kelly.
And I think this is the part where you jump in. Is that right, Thomas?
It can be, definitely can be. So the current slide up there is early assumptions about work in the screen industry. So kia ora everyone that I do and don't know. Lovely to see all your faces and lovely to share this space with you. Thank you, Kelly and Sandy, so much for opening this korero. I'm kind of feeding in from a different perspective, being a producer who's kind of built my way up through the sector, starting as a young person. I started in the industry at 18, which is a bit unreal and kind of insane. And am now running my own business full time and making this my full time paid employment. So I'm bringing that that lens to this kaupapa, and we thought it might be good to kind of speak to some of the early assumptions that we've witnessed when people kind of come out of tertiary institutions and straight into the sector. And one of those assumptions is that you're going to walk out of tertiary and you're going to walk straight onto a set and be the next Xavier Dolan. I don't know if you know that reference, but he was a very young director of a French film I loved called I Killed My Mother. And so chances are when you leave tertiary, you're not going to come straight into the sector as a producer, director, or a writer. You're probably likely to find your first step in the ladder in a below the line role. And when we talk about above and below the line, we're talking above the line are all the people who contribute the most creatively to a project. So that's directors, writers, producers, and key cast. And then below the line are all the other people who are the intrinsic and important cogs in the wheel to make a production happen. And so that's people like your camera crew, your gaffer, your costume, your makeup, your visual effects, and your post team. And so one of those early assumptions is that you're going to immediately launch into an above the line role. But what we kind of talk to is the importance of seeing below the line as a really fundamental part of your career pathway. There was another early assumption that Sandy wanted to speak to about reaching out. Sandy, do you want to take that one?
About reaching out, that's right. I think coming back to, I suppose we're making an assumption that you have assumptions about working in the industry in the first instance, just to make that really clear. Okay.
Yeah.
So please, share with any of what you might think. It's super hard to, I suppose, unpack and see your own assumptions. I think coming back to that beginner's mind, I think with the industry, personally speaking, once again, there is always I want to be a writer, director, producer. It seems to be a default position. I think sitting at the end of any program, any film that you watch, we all know that the credits roll a lot longer below the line. And once again, below the line, to be clear, is the crew. Above the line, as Thomas just said, your actors, your director, your producer, executive producers. I think there's the passion that you bring that we talked about just before. You getting very clear as to what spins your wheels in the industry. There may be some aspects to roles in the industry that really, really nourish that, and that for a while you can sit in and expand your knowledge of the industry, the broader, I suppose, village that it takes to make a story, to bring a story from the page onto the screen. I think there are lots of beautiful ways to support other people who have stories that need to be told. An assumption might be, I have to be the one to tell my story because I've got a story to tell. I think in the early days that might be a very good thing, but then in another way, it might be safer for you to support somebody else make their story, for you to learn from what they went through. I think another myth is this passion, you've got to do it for the love of it. I think as a long-term career, I personally would go above and below the line. I would try to have something that balanced the two. Cash flow is a very big thing. I think working and being able to live at the same time are incredibly important. And we all have roofs over our heads that we've got to pay for in one way, shape, form, or another. So I think it comes back to understanding the working of the sector as a whole, and where are the opportunities of learning? You know, where can I learn a little bit more so that when I do want to direct, or if I do want to write, or if I do want to produce, I will understand all of those roles underneath me and how that rich tapestry can be brought together to create my story, because it is a collaboration 100%. We can't do it without everybody else who is involved on those credits, you know, from the runner through to the writer, from the caterer through to the hair and makeup to the costume. It's a very, very exciting industry because it draws on so many different creative elements, aspects. And then you've got the hardware, you've got the amazing camera equipment, you've got very hard structures, you're building and creating worlds. So it's a big world. So I think an assumption is to think about the big elements and even the service industries that feed into our sector. So I think just keep your lens open at this point in your career, and don't assume that it ends up being kind of like narrow.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's excellent advice. We've had some questions, and I think it might be worth clarifying again what you mean by above the line and below the line roles, just for anybody who wants that spelled out a bit more clearly. Do you want to take that, Thomas?
Yeah, so I Googled it because I had just assumed, starting the industry so young, I didn't even question that. But it's an old Hollywood way of separating out the people that contribute creatively to the project or are like intrinsic and key creative contributors, and therefore influence the decision making and have that kind of leadership role. And accounting above the line also means in certain spheres like something about like back end profit. I'm not a financial accountant, but it also means that, which also makes sense in a film setting, because often those above the line talent are the people who share in the revenue in the back end of a film, and then below the line are again those people who don't necessarily have that equity in the project or that creative influence over the project in the same level of way. Does that answer that, Kelly?
Yeah, so your crew, people that you might be hiring on daily or weekly rates, they're likely to be your below the line costs, and the above the line might include things like your executive producer and the people that are doing the sort of the shepherding the project through from start to end. That might be a really simple way.
Sorry, Kelly, just to add to what Thomas just mentioned, I think it's really important when it looks like that might be the fun place to play in the sandpit, you know, coming with that responsibility. There's the finance, there's the weight of the project, there's the legal responsibilities, which we'll touch on later, in terms of even from your health and safety, your mandatory terms under the Screen Industry Workers Act. You've got your warranties that you have to give to your funding agencies to deliver. So there's a lot of responsibility. You know, you could call it the head above the pulpit, the head looking out over. It's the head that may kind of like get flipped around the ears. I won't use the other sort of stronger analogy. They're the heads that have the weight. When things go wrong, you know, they're the people who have to kind of step up and really kind of keep pushing through to shepherd, once again, as you said, Kelly, the project through. So there's a lot of responsibility that comes with then what is reflected in the ability to have a back end in the profits, which may flow, I have to add, from sales revenue that come back in.
I'd just like to jump in on the sort of looking at the mechanics of it with my Screen Industry Guild hat on. A really great way to find your way in is to find your passion space. I know I end up in a lot of talks with people coming into the industry, and they're like, yes, I'm going to be a producer, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that. But what we also do is slow it down a little bit, because by starting your career as a pathway, something that really resonates with you, something that really, you know, looking at all of the different departments. I mean, on our rate card, I think we have 460 something roles on our online rate card for below the line crew. That's a lot of roles and a lot of opportunity. So it's kind of finding, so certain people that I've met, we were having chats and it was like, well, what do you like to do on the weekend? And someone's like, I love going around the op shops and I like doing this and that. And I'm like, okay, well, why aren't we sort of looking at being an art department buyer, a prop buyer? Another one I was talking about, what do you like to do? And they did a bit of caring and things like that. And they were like, oh my goodness, that health and safety line actually really talks to me. And then someone else was going, hang on a minute, I just love cooking and doing all of that. And it's like, well, hey, we have a catering department. We have so many opportunities to come in. Somebody else likes, I like to go out and just take little videos and some photography, camera assistant. Somewhere where you really like tinkering, some construction, we cross all primary industry and below the line, which is phenomenal. I don't know any other industry in New Zealand or sector that does that. We cover everything, locations, people, being out and being a location assist. So, and don't think that you're starting on that lower level as assistants or coordinators. What you're actually doing, and this is what I've been telling so many of my people, you are starting the idea of learning how the mechanics work. And I sort of see it like understanding what's going on in the engine of your car. This is how everything fits together. This is where everyone brings something to the table and we know how to fix it. And you can see, oh, that's how that works. Oh, that's how that works. Oh, this is how this comes together. And when you can understand how the machine works, if you're coming in as a producer or a director, you've got so much to bring to the table because you've seen what does work, what doesn't work, and you can also understand how the HODs, the heads of these departments, run those key departments as well, which is really, really critical, because that's when you're at that producer level or you're directing, understanding how your HODs come together and getting a really amazing team of heads of department where you've got your costume and you've got your your art departments and all of that. It's an incredible, looking at it as a credible training ground to really understand the bigger picture and bringing your core values to your own project, because you will see things that are done really, really well and you'll see things that aren't. So I really, really embrace everybody coming through going, what do you really lean into? And then coming back to what we were talking about before, being able to have a secondary income where you can sort of move around and go, yep, I can jump on this project for a few months. This is going to be great. I can go do that project, and that's going to give me enough for those 3 months to go and, and I can work on my project. And oh my goodness, all of a sudden you're getting connections. And we all know the networking part of this industry. We all know what that means. And it's also people, you go, oh my goodness, hey, I've just worked with this amazing camera guy, and we've ended up getting on really, really well. And it started just talking, and they're like, hey, you've got your short film coming up, or you've got this project coming up. Hey, get in touch. So it's amazing. That is how our family works. It really is. And that networking and really understanding, if you're starting in here, you're building, and then you could find another area that you just go, wow, that's amazing. And on another point, I have so many crew that travel around the world. So many crew. You've got a lot more opportunity to end up in Australia, or I don't know, some of my guys, they end up in Antarctica.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've shot on every continent except Antarctica in my career. So you're absolutely right, Kelly, and that's one of the best bits. Thomas, do you want to tell us about your experiences and
Yes,
your pathway?
I can. So I think just to kind of springboarding off what Sandy and Kelly have been speaking to is the fact that I started my career below the line. And so I started in the industry at the age of 18 as a fresh-faced person straight out of high school. I walked into a production company and had the gall to ask to work for them. And so I ended up working as a PA or / assistant to the MD of a small local production company here in Wellington, and worked part-time through my studies at university. And because it was such a small company, it was effectively 4 people, which a lot of our local production companies are quite small. It was an MD, a production manager, a bookkeeper who came in twice a week, and then myself as the PA who was working during university 3 days a week. And so what that gave me was a really fundamental insight into how the mechanics of the local funding system worked in terms of reaching out to networks, reaching out to the funders. And I was writing every email that was coming out of that business during the time that I was there. So I got a really fundamental insight into how a producer worked and how the industry worked. And it kind of also helped to guide me, because when I left high school, I thought I might want to go to Toi Whakaari and be an actor. But as I went into the sector and I started working in the sector and working for this company, I realized that I had a passion for writing, which I always had, and they really valued my development insights. But B, I also really loved the beautiful thing that was producing and was working in production and supporting a creative person to realize their vision. So after that first 3 years working in that company, while I was also studying film and media at university, the production manager left and went on maternity leave. And because it was such a small company and I'd been there so long, I understood how it worked. I understood the managing director. And so I was promoted to the production manager of the business straight out of university. And that, because it's such a small business, I ended up doing so many things that a production manager on just a single production wouldn't necessarily, including developing ideas, pitching to networks, running the business itself and managing the books, sorting travel for the MD to go to market, selling our back catalogue of projects to overseas buyers. And so I got a really broad perspective. And so part of production managing that business involved me producing and co-writing 140 episodes of a preschool series, and then developing and production coordinating a premium docudrama. And these were experiences that I would only have had in such a small company by throwing myself forward, and just kind of, there's almost a level of luck, but it was that below the line time while I was working in that company that I built networks with crew, sound, camera people, all sorts of humans that I then kind of translated forward. So while I was in that 3 years as production manager, I also secured funding independently for my first short film through the Film Commission. And it was the experience I'd had working in that business that made the Film Commission confident to give me public money as an independent producer. And I also used the resources of that production company to make my $10,000 short film possible, which was an animated film, which was done by a group of 3 of us in the middle of the night and after hours over the course of a year. But we also were able to use the sound facilities, the post facilities that the company had, which saved hugely on the cost. And all of the networks that I'd built while I'd been at that company also contributed to that first short film. That short film did well on the festival circuit. And after 6 years working in the company, I realized that I was a little bit burnt out. But the hours are quite punishing in production. For any of you that already work in production, you'll know production is a high demand, constantly asking job. And being 24 at the time, I kind of wanted to be a young person. And so I made a call to leave the job, and I wanted to carve my own path because I really liked the agency that came with curating my own content and creating my own, supporting my own talent. But I also knew that was a big risk and there was a chance that it wouldn't come to fruition. And so I knew that I needed to build like a sustainable base below myself so that I could still pay my bills and make the content I wanted to make. So I ended up getting a day job as an office manager at the stock exchange, and using that as a funding mechanism to allow me to work on really low budget projects as a producer, and build my slate and build my credits off the back of 6 years in production into then producing my own slate. And so I did 2 scripted web series that were funded through what was then called the New Zealand Digital Media Fund. It was the first kind of web series that were funded back in the day, and we had bugger all money to make what is almost a feature length of content across Happy Playland and Tragicomic, and we did it out of sheer will and determination. But I was only able to do that because I had the safety blanket of a full-time job underneath me, which came with its own challenges, because I was balancing both full-time work and then in the evenings sussing production for these 2 projects. So off the back of those, that kind of built me a little bit of a cred in terms of the networks and the funding agencies. They saw that I could be trusted with public money, and that I ended up selling one of those projects to TVNZ as well. And because I had the background and tamariki content from my early career with that first production company, it was a passion area for me, and so I was looking at the Hey Hey scheme for opportunities to pitch for content, and it was an open pitch, and so I ended up pitching for a show and getting that show funded, and that project was enough for me to then take the leap after 4 years at the production company into a full-time career managing my own slate. But it would have only given me 6 months, 6 months of work, and so I was prepared to take that risk, because after 4 years working with the company and balancing both that and the passion on the outside, I was ready to come full burst into the industry. But one of the other things that full-time job gave me the ability to do was to build a nest egg, was to save for a house with my partner, which I was very lucky to do in the market as it was at that time. So only 4 years ago, right before COVID. So we bought a house and we structured our savings in our life so that I could earn very little and do what I loved, because I knew that I wouldn't be happy in my life talking to those core values if I wasn't doing something I loved and really cared about and was really passionate about. And so we did that, and we built this structure of this little safety blanket under ourselves so I could then take the jump 10 years after starting my career into being a full-time producer. In the first 6 months, I ended up working on an international production as a production supervisor. And that was amazing, because I was paid more than I'd ever been in my life on an international production. And I again extended my networks. I got my foot back in the door in terms of local crew. I got a sense of who was around in Wellington, what things were like. I saw things I liked. I saw things I didn't like. And I was able to carry that forward to my production process, my production practice, my producing practice. And so since that point where I made that decision to jump and flip into full-time managing my own business, I've balanced my career, and I've balanced my very small slate of projects between my own projects that I get commissioned by local funders here in New Zealand, and also working on other people's projects or taking other kinds of contracts that are slightly related within the industry. So I'm the Wellington Regional Manager of the 48 Hours Film Festival. I'm currently contracting at New Zealand On Air as the Within My Reach project manager. And so these related kind of things all kind of feed into my bucket and my skill set and my knowledge base that serves my producing slate. So I'm now 13 years into my career, and I'm slowly building a slate and continuously learning things and crafting it, but I still have to rely on below the line roles in order to continue being sustainable, at least for now. Hopefully one day the producing will completely take over. But I think they're those key kind of fundamental things that I did to make it possible for myself because the above the line roles and knowing that producing was my passion and writing was my passion, I needed to find a way in which I could access those things while still having a sustainable existence. And so that's where those key things of building a nest egg under yourself. I always have 3 months of pay set aside in my own personal account. If I don't have any projects on and I can't be paid by my business, I have 3 months worth of money set aside so that if that happens, I have security for that period while I look for other work. And I also did that other thing of getting some security under myself in terms of a house. That can be a range of other things for people, but that was the security I needed to feel secure. Getting that under me and getting that at a level in which I knew I could afford earning very little money to sustain my very small little production company. That's my talk. Any questions?
If you have any questions for Thomas about their career or their experience, or if that provokes any questions for you, pop them in the chat. Kelly, did you have a case study for us next as well?
Absolutely, I'd love to share this because
Brilliant.
I have an amazing friend who has been, she's an award-winning short filmmaker, she's an award-winning music video producer, and she's worked in this industry for a number of years. She's originally from overseas, and we actually met in the UK a number of years ago, but she's immigrated here now, and she is phenomenal producer. She's done a bit of work in the ad world as well, doing commercials. So she's got those experiences, but as she's wanting to expand her career through and get more drama opportunities and film, she's worked as a production coordinator, a production assistant on big films. She's also worked, at the moment she's doing a location assisting and coordinating for a New Zealand drama. So she's seen that even though she's an absolute award-winning producer, she wants to be able to go and get the other experience and understanding through the, in New Zealand drama, and, she's got international experience. She's got an opportunity at the moment to look at doing some line producing for a smaller New Zealand film. So, all of these things are tools in her belt. And so, she's an amazing example of you can have your producing career and do short films and do, but as you're kind of going through for the bread and butter places, but also the experience of how everything works as she's working through to that sort of higher levels and getting into drama and film, she's actually going into those other areas, and she really leans more so usually to the production assisting coordinating roles. She's done production management as well on smaller productions. So she's a fantastic example of how you can balance between the two worlds, and how it all works towards, as we come back to that very, very first screen, where you're 3 to 5, or you're, as we know, I think, was it Warra Warra took 10 years for John Barnett to get that going. Maybe it was longer. I remember him having that conversation, one of your Spartas, Sandy. It takes a while. If you've got your particular project, it can take time. And then, as we know, sometimes things fall over, really, when it comes to the finance. So what Thomas comes back to and saying about keeping that 3 months, super important. I know when it's a bit feast famine, and we've been in a bit of a famine this past year, and then prior to that we had COVID. But at the moment, we're in a really good spot to kind of go, things are getting busy, the world has opened up, the strikes are over. I don't want to say it too loud. It's all going to keep going fine. It's all going to be fine. Because obviously, I've my crew to me are family, every single one of them. And so, we all want people to be out there and working and getting experience and having amazing experiences while they're doing it. And Thomas is right. The pressure is on when you're in that. And it's really just making sure you're being able to manage your person, your well-being, so important. But it's also the well-being of everybody around you as you come through. But there's some really amazing things to be learnt through this, and how you can have a beautiful balance between above the line and below the line, and have that that come together for you, so you can build a career in this industry, because we all want to see you here in another 10 to 15. You're sitting here saying it's been 20 odd years, and yeah, and having those networks. And just one of those assumptions too, you can ring me at any point. You don't have to be a member. You can send me an email. Sandy and our roles are support people, you know, for the industry. And we're both very, very passionate about this. And as we go through, we'll talk about Blue Book and all those other parts of what we collaborate on. But yeah, just sort of wanting to really just understand that, you know, knowing the mechanics of the industry below the line can really strengthen your craft.
Absolutely. I think now we've got some considerations, particularly financial ones, for people to be aware of. Sandy, do you want to talk a bit to this?
Sure. Thomas and I are just
Everybody
going to
can, yeah.
bounce around with this one. I mean, look, this is the nuts and bolts, isn't it? You've got to make sure as contractors, as producers, that you are meeting all your tax obligations, withholding tax, which is 20%, your tax code, 24. Think about KiwiSaver. You don't have to register for GST until you hit that 60K threshold.
Yeah. The points
so
I'd just talk to this, Sandy, is the fact that with a lot of newer crew that I work with, I recognize this in, and also potentially I had these assumptions as well, that with these things like KiwiSaver and student loan and ACC, you kind of come in assuming that when you're doing contract mahi, that all these things are going to be handled for you. But the reality is that you're going to need to handle them yourself, because you'll be because as a contractor, you're not an employee, so you're not given those benefits, or those things aren't paid out of your pay packet. So thinking about how you can kind of manage that yourself, and doing some research. And at the end of this call, we're going to circulate a really great resource that Sparta has built called the Sparta Starter Pack, which has a huge range of links where you can to the IRD website, to MB, that gives you some really good, solid information from the government departments about how to meet your tax obligations, and things to think about in terms of and skill yourself up on. It's one of the things that I wish tertiary institutions were better at teaching, was understanding how the mechanics of actually being paid, and then paying the little extra bit that you have to pay to be part of society goes for contractors. But over the last number of years, there have been a number of services that have popped up that are really beautifully built for contractors. For instance, Henry, which is amazing, and which manages all that for you, and can set it out for you, and do your student loan payments on your behalf. But if you're going to start a small business, then it's really important that you hire an accountant, and have a trusted accountant that can roll that, like ensure that your end of year accounts reflect any profit or loss in your business, and any kind of depreciation of assets that you might find yourself purchasing alongside it. Sandy, did you want to take the baton back?
I think it was just to reiterate the importance of insurance with your public liability as a producer. We've used the word rigid and detailed personal budget. Probably can't stress enough that it is a place which requires discipline. You really can't afford to not pay attention to your finances and these financial considerations. They are the foundation of the career that you're building, the life that you're building. Thomas spoke very well to the importance of building a financial buffer. You know, we are in a cyclical project to project until you develop a Slater style business. There's also the likelihood that if you apply for funding, as many of you have done in the latest round with New Zealand On Air, that you may not get this funding. So how are you supporting yourself financially? Always seek the advice, as Thomas has already mentioned. Always seek advice from an accountant. We've got lots of different software with Henry, etc. But yeah, I think sit, and if you're uncomfortable thinking about finances or being around money, you know, the idea of it, some people have quite a strong aversion to this side of the business. try to get very comfortable with being uncomfortable, try to really get a level of understanding and competency, sit with somebody who loves finances so that you can kind of learn off them and, you know, get to know Excel spreadsheet and make it your best friend.
But don't be
Yeah.
afraid of it as well, because if you've got your accountant, they will take care of these things. You need to have total confidence. You are accountable in the end, but you don't need to understand it as well as they do. So just trust that you're getting the right support, and then you don't need to be afraid. But don't ignore it.
Yeah, there's the good note, Kelly. Don't ignore it.
Yeah.
Yeah, take it by the horns, and financial confidence actually comes with a lot of freedom. You know, if you're confident in your finances, it makes you feel a lot more secure and safe, and it gives you lots more freedom to kind of understand how to best make money work for you, and that's a great thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
Next slide, Nina. Industry specific guides.
Oh, so shall I just kick this off with the noted Sparta Starter Pack? Super excited about getting this fantastic resource out to everybody. This is like a one-stop shop guide. It is brilliant. It takes you through from development through to production, post-production, distribution, exhibition. If you're in the film space, it's got a lot of additional resources. As we've just mentioned, in the business aspect, we've got links to MB for sole trader resources, IRD, duties as a company director, your health and safety obligations as a sole trader or as a business, your insurance, your legal agreements. There is just a raft of really useful things that you know. It includes the Blue Book. So you've got your codes of practice, you've got your Blue Book, which is for the engagement of crew. There's the Screen Industry Workers Act, which details those mandatory terms which are now in effect. So when you get to the place where you're contracting, there are mandatory terms, 6 new rules for individual contracts, which you need to get familiar with if you aren't already. Your duty of good faith, you must have your individual contracts in writing, etc. The terms must be no worse than anything that is already out there or being negotiated. Engagers can't cancel contracts in retaliation for workers exercising their rights. I'm just reading through what we have on the website. These are all links which are embedded in the Sparta Starter Pack, those guidelines. And if Kelly wanted to talk a little bit more about the Blue Book, this is a kind of guide to hiring of crew, which has been in existence now for like 40 years, isn't it, Kelly?
Around, yes, it's nearly. I think we're not far off actually, 40 years. And we've just released last year, and thanks to Sandy and APA, which is the Advertising Producers Association, the latest Blue Book update. So we work together with Sparta, we work with APA, which is for the commercial market. And this is really around getting to know this inside and out is huge for if you're a producer or if you're part of the crew. It's really understanding what you know, if you're away on location, what are the rules, your accommodation, to what are the hours, how it goes into your T1.5 or your T2 and your hours and your rates and things. So you can access this as a digital copy online on the Screen Guild website. If you do become a Screen Guild member, it's part of your annual membership you get a free book. So I would definitely do some deep diving. It's got so much in it. It takes a while for us to negotiate every year, or every year. We don't do this every year, every 5 or 6 years. And this is from people who have been in the industry for a really long time. So they really understand where the pitfalls are and what things need to change and what we need to recognise. Even also thinking about your shoot dates, because there's certain public holidays that we do recognise. So it's sort of looking at your dates even when you're thinking around things like that. So yeah, and big thanks to Sandy for all her support with putting the Blue Book together. So I'm sure everyone is aware of the Blue Book. it is a guideline, but mostly what I do understand is that a lot of the contracts that come from New Zealand On Air and the Film Commission do ask to look at the Blue Book guidelines as part of their funding contracts as well. So
Yeah, absolutely.
and please don't hesitate if there's something in there that you don't understand or the wording's not quite right. I spend a lot of hours during my week just talking through sometimes with producers, or there's a situation that comes up and go, oh my goodness, we're going to go into, you know, the shoot. We've got a weather, we've had to go into our weather day, or we're having to put a weather day in, and you know, what do I do here? You know, don't hesitate just to reach out, and we're here to talk it through.
Yeah, and also included in the starter pack is the collaboration with the New Zealand Writers Guild that Sparta did, which developed the best practice guide. And there is fantastic guidance there for developing very collaborative and productive relationships between the writer-producer, how to approach a writer-producer, developing your communication, your collaboration skills, talks about copyright, talks about credits, ownership, your professional development tools. Also, it talks about the importance of defining roles in a working relationship. So coming back to what I mentioned at the beginning of this talk or this conversation, it's really important to allow yourself some time. This is very much about upskilling and knowing more about our craft, to go through some of these resources that are so rich in some of these fundamentals. So as Kelly has said, make sure you know your Blue Book, make sure you go through the best practice guide, read the starter pack, so that you're at least aware of these things, and you'll have a little bell going, oh, I think I know where I might be able to find some more information about that. When it comes to our production, when you start getting really busy, when that pressure comes on for things to be done and turned around really quickly. And obviously, you know, Sparta is there. We are also a membership organisation. We are there to support producers as well as the wider screen industry. And if you aren't a member, don't hesitate to still call or get in touch with any questions, because, you know, we see it really important. That's why we've developed these resources. They're freely available to everybody, because it makes for a much better, safer, as well as productive, and therefore hopefully that translates to the projects are made in a more secure, productive way, and the creativity can flow a little bit better when you have these fundamentals ticked off. And we also talk about key relationships. A number of us have already talked about how important your networks are, developing those networks, using those relationships in a very mindful way. It's not just to always be taking from people. What can you give? What can you also give back? What are some of your key skills that you think, well, I can share that with that person because I know that's not their area of expertise, or they're not as comfortable talking about finances. I love working with numbers, but I know blah blah doesn't. So when it comes to budgeting, I'll sit alongside them and help them. So I think all about this is looking at everything that we have sitting there available and deep diving into it when you need to. Definitely go onto ScreenSafe's website. Once again, a lot of great resourcing to help with templates, with your risk management, with ensuring you have very healthy and safe sets, taking that into your relationships in the development stage as well, to ensure you have safe spaces for everybody. So I think it's just, I'm very proud of everything that we've developed over the last few years. I think there's a lot of really amazing rich resources that we hope you will find useful.
Thank you. That's brilliant. It's a great message that we're all here for people when they've got questions. And actually, if you've got them, don't feel you have to reach out to us later. You can ask them now. So there's a few more minutes, and if anyone's got any questions, the group would love to answer them. So you can even just shout them out if you don't want to put them in the chat. I think.
Could I just add in there, Kelly?
Yeah.
Thank you. Just on the ScreenSafe, we are relaunching the website. Hopefully it'll be in April, and it's going to be a lot more easier to get around. There's a lot of guidance there, from working with animals to working with children. Please, if you are working with children, take note of that. It's imperative that we understand what all the rules to keep the children safe. But from working at heights right through your risk management, at the moment it is an older website, so we do understand that it needs, it's going through the upgrade, and we're super excited about where it's heading. We also run a program for professional respect training, which is to predominantly trying to have sexual harassment prevention through into our culture, have a culture shift. We've had about 550 people through that program now. So if you do see that come up, it is a free workshop that we do in different parts of the country over the year. And it's super important as a producer, but as an HOD or as a person just coming to set, that we go through that, because it does also look at bullying and other forms of harassment, which is really, really important. But it does, if you want to have safe sets, there's a tab on there that you can download posters to have on your site. There's crew briefings. If there's intimacy scenes, there's a crew briefing for intimacy scenes. And I would like to do a bit of a shout out on behalf of the intimacy coordinators. I would highly recommend, if you do have intimate scenes, and that's not just sex scenes, that's working with young children, changing a nappy, or an elderly person if they're bathing, anything that works towards, I would definitely recommend bringing the intimacy coordinators in to support that. So I just thank you for your time. It's been fantastic to be here. Any questions? Don't hesitate.
Thank you. I think we're at time, so I'll just wrap it up. But I think that message is coming through, that there are a ton of resources out there, and there's a lot to consider. So you don't have to know it all. You can reach out to Sparta, to the Screen Guild and ScreenSafe, to New Zealand On Air. We're all there for you. And thank you so much to everybody for attending today, and to Kelly, Sandy, Thomas, and Nina for a really useful discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Thanks,
Kia
everybody.
kite anō.
Thanks, everybody.
Kia kite.